Chapter 1. The rain drummed against the Berlin safehouse windows like machine gun fire, each drop a reminder of the kind of night that made ghosts feel mortal. Sam Wick sat at the scarred wooden table, cleaning his Glock 19 with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through these months of TF-77 operations, but his hands moved without conscious thought. His mind was still in Istanbul, still hearing a 12-year-old girl scream for her dead father. Wick. Keisha Williams' voice cut through the rain's percussion with practiced efficiency. She slid a manila folder across the table, her fingers drum-tapping against the surface in a rhythm that suggested caffeine and classified intelligence. New mission. Time-sensitive. Had to deliver this in person. Too sensitive for digital channels, and after Istanbul, McAvoy wants face-to-face assessment of your psychological state. Wick's cleaning rod paused mid-stroke. The tension in Keisha's shoulders spoke of operations already sideways, the way she chewed her lower lip when intelligence came incomplete. 9 months had taught him to read her tells, how her Detroit accent sharpened when stakes climbed beyond routine elimination work. Define time-sensitive, Wick said, field-stripping his pistol while his eyes tracked her eyes. He had noted how she watched his hands as he cleaned the weapon, cataloging micro-tremors and hesitation patterns like a psychologist, studying trauma responses. 48 hours. Keisha opened the file to reveal surveillance photos of a middle-aged German man with exhausted eyes that belonged to someone carrying unbearable weight. Klaus Weber. Bundesnachrichtendienst, German intelligence, currently selling NSA quantum encryption codes to the highest bidder. Wick studied Weber's face through the photographs, balding, soft around the middle, wearing expensive glasses that couldn't hide the desperation etched into every line. A career intelligence officer who'd probably never imagined choosing between his country and his child, until cancer turned loyalty into a luxury he couldn't afford. Quantum encryption. Wick reassembled his Glock with practiced efficiency. NATO communications, satellite networks, nuclear command structures, among other things. Keisha's voice carried weight that came from understanding exactly how many people could die if those codes reached the wrong hands. Weber's already sold 1 package to Chinese MSS. Intelligence suggests he's got backup copies heading for Russian SVR day after tomorrow. The photographs showed Weber in various Berlin locations: Brandenburg Gate, Museum Island, Potsdamer Platz. Tourist areas where intelligence exchanges happened daily, hidden among crowds photographing monuments to dead empires. What drives him? Wick asked, studying one photo that showed Weber at what looked like a medical facility. Money? Ideology? Keisha slid another document across the table, medical bills that made Wick's stomach tighten. Emma Weber, age 8, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, treatment costs approaching 200,000 euros for experimental therapy in Switzerland. Wick stared at the numbers and ice settled in his stomach. Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic, same as Volkov's daughter in Istanbul. Wick's voice carried an edge that made Keisha pause. 12-year-old girl, dying of leukemia, father selling weapons to pay for treatment. He looked up from the file. What are the odds, Keisha? Coincidences happen in intelligence work. Do they? 2 consecutive missions, 2 desperate fathers, 2 children with the exact same disease requiring expensive treatment. Wick set the medical bills down carefully. That's not coincidence. That's targeting criteria. Keisha's fingers stopped their drum tap rhythm. The mission parameters remain the same regardless of the fact that TF-77 specifically chooses targets with dying children, that you weaponize parental love. The threats are real, Wick. Weber's selling NATO codes. That makes him a legitimate target. I'm not questioning the threat. I'm questioning why TF-77 keeps finding targets whose children are dying of the same disease. The mission, Keisha continued, discarding Wick's concerns, is retrieval and elimination. You pose as his Chinese contact, recover the codes, terminate Weber, make it look accidental, clean, surgical, No diplomatic complications. Wick bit his lips but said nothing. The file contained detailed intelligence on Weber's background, 23 years with BND, specializing in Eastern European operations, extensive knowledge of Berlin's underground infrastructure from Cold War assignments, a career spent protecting German interests, now selling them to save his daughter. Dead drop location? Brandenburg Gate tourist area tomorrow morning. Weber thinks he's meeting his Chinese handler for final exchange. Keisha's fingers resumed their drum tap rhythm. Intelligence suggests he's desperate enough to be careless. Wick nodded, but something in Weber's profile bothered him. References to extensive tunnel knowledge and Cold War operational experience that seemed oddly specific for routine dead drop work. TF-77 missions described as straightforward usually involved climbing medieval clock towers or knife-fighting arms dealers in crowded bazaars. Extraction plan. Berlin's got extensive underground options dating to World War II. Keisha slid him a simplified map of the city's tunnel systems. If things go sideways, you've got multiple escape routes through U-Bahn maintenance areas, abandoned bunker systems, Cold War border tunnels. Place is a maze down there. Wick studied the map's complexity, layers of infrastructure built and rebuilt through decades of war, occupation, division, and reunification. Urban underground that could hide armies or swallow individuals without trace. Any backup? You're it. BND doesn't know we're aware of Weber's activities. German intelligence still considers him loyal, so any official coordination is off the table. This stays deniable. The rain continued its assault against the windows as Wick memorized Weber's face, his patterns, his known associates. Tomorrow morning he'd approach a desperate father at one of Berlin's most famous landmarks and kill him for trying to save his daughter's life. One man's life weighed against NATO's communication security, tactical precision serving strategic necessity. But Amara, the girl in Istanbul, had taught him that numbers couldn't calculate the weight of watching innocents suffer for adults' choices. One more thing, Keisha said, her voice carrying a note Wick couldn't quite identify. Weber's got experience with hostile interrogation, urban escape and evasion, small unit tactics. Don't let the medical bills fool you. This guy's not just a desperate father. He's been playing this game longer than you've been alive. Wick nodded, field stripping his weapon one final time before storing it in the tactical holster that had become familiar as his own skin. TF-77 operations carried potential for violence, but some missions promised it from the beginning. Outside, Berlin's rain continued falling on a city that had witnessed more ghosts than most places on Earth. Tomorrow, Sam Wick would add one more to that count. The execution, he suspected, would be anything but simple. About Wick. Redact. They told him to kill a traitor. He found a dying child in a buried conspiracy. The mission brief was simple. Eliminate a German intelligence officer selling NATO secrets. The reality is 8-year-old Emma Weber dying of cancer, watching her father drown in a flooded maintenance tunnel beneath Berlin. Now Sam Wick is hunted through Cold War bunkers and storm drains, carrying a traumatized child and evidence that could topple governments. German operatives want them dead. In the tunnels where East once met West, Wick discovers the deadliest enemy isn't foreign intelligence, it's the people who sent him. Some operations succeed, others leave survivors who remember everything. This is a Wick Files thriller, when Sam Wick's TF-77 was young and every recruit had blood on their hands. Let's continue. Chapter 2. Brandenburg Gate rose from the morning mist like a monument to imperial ambitions that had turned Europe into a graveyard twice in the last century. Tourist crowds were already gathering despite the early hour. Germans photographing their own history, Americans checking off bucket list items, Japanese tour groups following guides with colorful umbrellas through organized cultural chaos. Wick positioned himself near the gate's eastern approach, tourist camera hanging around his neck, guidebook tucked under his arm, every inch the lost American trying to navigate European history. The persona felt natural after months of practice, but his eyes tracked movement with systematic scanning that had kept him alive through 3 Afghanistan tours and 9 months of training and 3 impossible missions. Overwatch to Wanderer. Keisha's voice crackled through his earpiece, steady as always despite watching death unfold through satellite feeds. Target approaching from the south. 3 minutes. Wick spotted Weber threading through the crowd with careful movement of someone trying to appear casual while constantly checking for surveillance. The medical bills hadn't lied. The man looked exhausted, ill, carrying weight that came from watching a child die slowly while being unable to afford salvation. Visual contact, target looks nervous, scanning for counter-surveillance. Copy. No unusual activity on thermal. Proceed as planned. Wick moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, using tourist groups as cover while closing distance on Weber. The German had positioned himself near a souvenir stand, browsing postcards and Brandenburg Gate memorabilia, with forced interest that suggested he was waiting for someone. 50 meters, 40, 30. Close enough to see sweat on Weber's forehead despite the cool morning air, close enough to read desperation in his eyes as he checked his watch and scanned the crowd. Wick approached from Weber's blind spot, moving with casual confidence of someone meeting an old friend. Herr Weber? The German turned and Wick saw the exact moment recognition hit, not relief at seeing his expected contact, but cold fear of someone who just realized he was looking at death. You're American. Weber's hand moved slowly toward his jacket. CIA? FBI? Or something new? Weber shouldn't know. He couldn't know. This wasn't a botched exchange. It was a snare, carefully laid, and Wick had walked straight into it. Cold dread pooled in his stomach. I think you have me confused with someone else, Wick said, maintaining his tourist persona while calculating distances to cover, escape routes, weapons positions. I'm just looking for the Brandenburg Gate Museum. Weber's smile held no warmth. I know what you are. I know what you must have done. He gestured subtly toward a nearby cafe, where a young girl in a school uniform sat at a window table, working on homework while occasionally looking up to scan the crowd. Kill me and my daughter Emma dies too. Wick's jaw clenched as he looked at Emma Weber, 8 years old, bald from chemotherapy, wearing a pink headscarf that couldn't hide the ravages of cancer treatment. Just like Volkov's daughter in Istanbul. Same disease, same desperate father. Keisha wasn't lying. They really do target parents with dying children. The familiar weight of manipulation settled on his shoulders, heavier now because he understood exactly what TF-77 was doing. They'd positioned him here deliberately, knowing he'd have to look another desperate father in the eye while deciding whether his child lived or died. They want me to feel this, want me to carry this weight. Every dying child is another test, another way to shape me into what they need. She's beautiful, Wick said, meaning it, hating that he meant it, hating TF-77 for putting him in this position again. She is. She also has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Weber's voice carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who'd spent months watching hope die by degrees. 200,000 euros for experimental treatment in Switzerland. Her only chance. Do you have children? The question hit like a blade between ribs. No. Then you can't understand. When your child is dying, loyalty becomes a luxury. Patriotism becomes an abstraction. There is only the arithmetic of desperation, what you're willing to sacrifice to buy one more day, one more chance, one more miracle. I understand more than you know, Wick thought bitterly. I understand that T-77 probably orchestrated your daughter's treatment denial, created the desperation they're now exploiting. The codes, Wick said quietly, watching Emma through the cafe window as she bent over homework that might be her last. Weber's hand moved inside his jacket and Wick tensed for a weapon draw. Instead, the German produced a flash drive that looked like any tourist's photo storage device. Quantum encryption algorithms, enough to compromise NATO communications for the next 5 years, worth $50 million on the open market. Weber's hand trembled as he held the device. I tell myself it's just data, Numbers and letters that protect communications between men who've never watched their children fight for breath. But I know what it really is. Then why sell for medical bills? Because my daughter is dying. Weber's voice cracked with the weight of choices no parent should face. Because the people I've served my entire career, 23 years protecting German interests, won't authorize experimental treatment for a BND officer's child. Because some accountant decided Emma's life isn't cost-effective. And because TF-77 knew exactly what pressure to apply to break you, Wick thought, recognizing the familiar architecture of manipulation he was now trapped within. The same way they broke Volkov, the same way they're breaking me. Chapter 3. Movement in Wick's peripheral vision, 3 men in dark clothing moving through the crowd with coordinated precision that spoke of training and hostile intent. Not Weber's Chinese contacts, something else entirely. "We've got company," Wick said into his mic, his hand already moving toward his concealed Glock. "Negative on thermal, nothing unusual showing on satellite." Keisha's voice crackled back, but Wick could see them cutting through the crowd like sharks through fish. The lead man was tall, angular, with pale complexion that never saw tropical sun and eyes that had watched people die without flinching. His companions flanked left and right, moving to box in Weber's position while maintaining the appearance of casual tourism, professional, lethal, closing fast. BND. Weber recognized them the same moment Wick did, his face going ashen. "My former colleagues, sent to clean up loose ends. They here for you or for me?" "Both, I suspect." Weber grabbed his daughter's hand as she approached from the cafe, her homework bag clutched against her chest like armor. The look on his face, pure terror mixed with desperate protectiveness, was the same expression Wick had seen on Volkov's face in Istanbul. "Emma, stay close to Papa." The girl looked up at Wick with serious eyes, children who'd spent too much time in hospitals, who'd learned that adults couldn't always protect them from the things that hurt. Her pink headscarf was decorated with cartoon characters, cheerful defiance in the face of mortality that made Wick's chest tighten with familiar rage. Another dying child, another father trying to save her, another fucking test from TF-77. "Papa," she said in German-accented English, her voice small but steady. "Are these the bad men you told me about?" "Yes, Emma. Stay behind me." The BND operatives were closing distance 60 meters, 50-40, coordinated and armed with weapons that would turn Brandenburg Gate into a killing field if shooting started. Tourist crowds provided cover, but also created collateral damage scenarios that would turn an intelligence operation into an international incident with body counts measured in dozens. The lead operative's hand was already inside his jacket. 40 meters. 30. Emma was directly in their line of approach, a cancer-weakened 8-year-old who wouldn't survive being caught in crossfire. "This way," Weber said, his voice tight with controlled panic as he moved toward the U-Bahn entrance with Emma's hand clutched in his. "There are places we can go, places they can't follow." 20 meters. The lead operative's weapon was clearing his jacket, a suppressed Sig Sauer P226 that would make very little noise while turning Weber into a problem that no longer required expensive solutions. Wick had 3 seconds to make a choice, complete his mission by eliminating Weber and letting BND clean up their own mess, or protect a dying child and her desperate father from intelligence operatives who decided that loyalty was less important than operational security. Keisha knew this would happen. TF-77 knew BND would be here. They set this up, another impossible choice, another test of how much blood I'm willing to spill for their psychological experiments. The rage that had been building since the mission briefing, at TF-77, at Keisha, at himself for accepting another assignment that would traumatize another child, crystallized into something cold and deadly. Fuck them. Fuck all of them. The lead BND operative drew his weapon, raising it toward Weber's back while Emma walked trustingly beside her father, completely unaware that death was 15 meters behind her. Wick moved, his Glock-cleared leather as he stepped between the operative and Weber's family, tourist persona abandoned in favor of violence that had kept him alive through 9 months of impossible missions. The BND man's eyes widened as he realized he was facing someone trained in the same deadly arts, but trained better and motivated by fury that had been building for months. "American, this is not your concern." "It is now," Wick replied and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed round took the operative's center mass, punching through his sternum with kinetic energy that dropped him instantly. Blood sprayed across the Brandenburg Gate's ancient stones as the man collapsed, his weapon clattering uselessly across tourist-worn cobblestones. Tourist screams erupted around Brandenburg Gate as people finally understood that the men with guns weren't security guards or police. Panic spread like wildfire. German families diving for cover, American tour groups scattering in confusion, Japanese tourists filming everything while running for safety. Weber was already moving toward the U-Bahn entrance. Emma clutched against his side while chaos erupted behind them. The remaining BND operatives were drawing weapons, coordinating movement through hand signals, probably calling for backup that would turn central Berlin into a battlefield. "Wanderer, what's your status?" Keisha's voice crackled through Wick's earpiece as he followed Weber toward the underground entrance, his Glock still drawn, scanning for the remaining threats. "Mission's gone hot. German intelligence wants Weber dead, taking him underground." "Negative. Complete primary mission and extract." Her voice carried the cold authority of someone watching through satellite feeds while other people bled. "Weber dies today. That's the mission." Wick ignored her, following Weber and Emma down concrete steps that led to Berlin's underground arteries. Behind them, sirens were beginning to wail as emergency services responded to reports of gunfire at one of Germany's most famous landmarks. "Let her watch me disobey orders. Let TF-77 see what happens when they push their psychological experiments too far." The second BND operative appeared at the top of the stairs, weapon raised, taking careful aim at Weber's retreating form. Emma was still visible beside her father, a small target in a pink headscarf, completely unaware that men with guns were hunting her. Wick spun and put 2 rounds into the operative's chest before the man could fire. The body tumbled down the concrete steps, blood painting the walls as emergency lighting flickered in the confined space. "Wanderer, you are in direct violation of mission parameters." Keisha's voice was sharp now, probably realizing that her carefully orchestrated psychological experiment was spiraling beyond her control. "Return to mission objectives immediately." Mission objectives. Like Emma, Weber is just a variable in their equation. Like watching another child lose her father is just part of my training. The U-Bahn station was a maze of passages and platforms designed to move millions of people through the city's underground nervous system. Weber navigated the crowds with practiced ease, moving deeper into the tunnel system while Emma stayed pressed against his side, her homework bag clutched like a shield against the adult world that was trying to kill her father. "Where are we going?" Wick asked, catching up to them at a maintenance door that Weber opened with a key that shouldn't have existed. "Somewhere they can't follow, somewhere we can talk." Weber's face was gray with exhaustion and terror, but his hand on Emma's shoulder was steady. "Somewhere my daughter doesn't have to watch more people die." "Your daughter shouldn't have to watch anyone die," Wick thought, following them through the maintenance door while his earpiece crackled with increasingly urgent demands from Keisha. But TF-77 doesn't give a shit about what children should or shouldn't have to watch. Chapter 4. The maintenance tunnel was barely wide enough for 2 people, lined with pipes and electrical conduits that had been installed when Berlin was a divided city, and infrastructure meant survival. Weber moved through the cramped space with confidence of someone who'd navigated these passages before, but his breathing was becoming labored, stress and adrenaline taking their toll. "How do you know about these tunnels?" Wick asked, ducking under a steam pipe that leaked scalding water onto concrete worn smooth by decades of condensation. 23 years with BND. I helped map these systems during reunification. Border tunnels, abandoned bunkers, Cold War escape routes, every meter from here to the Brandenburg suburbs. Emma was crying quietly, overwhelmed by the violence and confusion, but trying to be brave for the man she believed was her father. Another child traumatized by adult decisions, another innocent paying the price for strategic necessity. The sound of boots echoed from the tunnel entrance, BND operatives moving with systematic precision through the underground maze, hunters who'd tracked them faster than Weber had expected. "They're close," Wick said, checking his remaining ammunition. "How much farther?" 50 meters. Weber gasped, sweat beading on his forehead as exhaustion and fear pushed his body beyond comfortable limits. "There's a maintenance junction. We can defend there." The tunnel curved ahead, following the path of utility lines that fed power and water to central Berlin. Steam from broken pipes created pockets of scalding mist that made visibility unpredictable and movement treacherous. Wick heard the first operative before he saw him, the scrape of tactical gear against concrete as someone dropped through a ceiling access point directly behind them. Precise entry, perfectly timed to cut off their retreat. "Down!" Wick shouted, pushing Emma toward Weber as the tunnel erupted in muzzle flashes. The BND operative had chosen his position perfectly. Narrow tunnel, confined space, nowhere for targets to maneuver. But he'd made one mistake, dropping into a space where Sam Wick had learned to kill efficiently in impossible situations, where Afghanistan's caves and Kandahar's sewers had taught him that confined spaces were weapons in themselves. The operative dropped through the ceiling access with textbook precision, tactical gear, suppressed MP5, night vision that turned the tunnel into a killing field of green-lit advantage. He landed in a crouch, weapon already tracking toward Weber's retreating form, toward Emma's small silhouette pressed against her father's side. Wick spun in the cramped tunnel, drawing his Glock as the operative's weapon swept past Emma's pink headscarf by inches. Steam from broken pipes created pockets of scalding mist that made visibility unpredictable, but the operative's laser sight cut through vapor like a red line of death, settling on Weber's back. The operative fired first. Suppressed rounds chewed through concrete beside Wick's head, the confined space amplifying even muffled gunshots into bone-rattling percussion. Wick dove sideways, his return fire going wide as he crashed into a steam pipe that scalded his shoulder through his jacket. The operative's MP5 jammed. In the tunnel's humidity and concrete dust, the weapon's bolt caught on a malformed cartridge. The operative cursed in German, trying to clear the jam while Wick scrambled for position in the cramped space. No time to fix the weapon, no room for finesse, just violence in a concrete pipe that barely allowed one man to stand upright. The operative dropped his useless rifle and drew his secondary weapon, not a pistol, but a tactical knife designed for close work, already moving toward Wick's throat in a strike that would open his carotid artery in one smooth motion. Combat training kicking in. When guns fail, blade work never does. Wick's Glock was caught beneath him, pinned against the tunnel floor by his fall. In the 5-foot-wide space, there was nowhere to dodge, only forward into the blade. He used momentum as weapon, driving his body weight into the operative's center mass while the knife whispered past his ear, close enough to part skin, close enough to draw blood that mixed with condensation on concrete walls. His elbow found the operative's windpipe, not a wild swing, but targeted destruction of the hyoid bone and tracheal cartilage that would end the fight in seconds. Cartilage collapsed under the impact with a wet crunch that echoed through the tunnel like breaking branches. The operative's eyes bulged as his crushed airway tried to process oxygen that would never come, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish while his weapon clattered to the tunnel floor. But the man was still fighting, still dangerous. Training didn't die just because breathing stopped. His hands found Wick's throat, fingers digging for pressure points that would turn the tables even as consciousness faded. Wick's hands found broken concrete, debris from decades of structural settling, chunks of rebar-reinforced stone that had fallen from ceiling joints weakened by time and neglect, sharp edges, heavy enough to crack bone, perfect improvised weapons in a space too cramped for gunplay. The first strike shattered the operative's nose, blood fountaining across tunnel walls as cartilage gave way under limestone impact. The second opened his scalp, revealing white bone beneath gray matter that would never process another tactical thought. The third strike drove jagged concrete into the man's temple with kinetic energy that liquefied brain tissue on contact. The impact was final. Neural pathways severed, motor functions ceased, life departing in the space between heartbeats. The operative dropped like cut strings, his body folding into the tunnel's cramped dimensions while blood pooled in the ancient concrete grooves, worn smooth by decades of industrial runoff. Emma screamed behind Weber's trembling hands, not the sharp cry of immediate terror, but the deep animal wail of a child watching adult violence unfold in spaces too small to contain its brutality. Her voice echoed through concrete passages, mixing with steam hiss and the metallic tang of fresh blood. "One down," Wick gasped, wiping blood from his face, some his own from the knife's near miss, some from the operative whose skull had painted tunnel walls red. Steam from broken pipes mixed with red, creating pink fog that turned the maintenance tunnel into something from a fever dream. Emma stared with traumatized silence, her pink headscarf now flecked with droplets that shouldn't exist in a child's world. Her homework bag lay forgotten on concrete stained with violence, cartoon characters smiling up at carnage that would fuel nightmares for years. Weber pulled her closer, his face gray with understanding that his daughter had just witnessed the kind of death that changed children forever. Another innocent casualty of intelligence wars, another young mind scarred by adult choices that reduced human life to tactical calculations. "More coming," Wick said, grabbing the dead operative's MP5 while checking the tunnel behind them. Boot steps echoed from multiple directions, coordinated movement that suggested the BND team was larger than expected, that Weber's former colleagues had brought enough firepower to turn Berlin's underground into a tomb. The concrete walls were closing in, literally and figuratively. Behind them lay more operatives with better equipment and perfect knowledge of the tunnel system. Ahead lay deeper passages that might lead to safety, or simply more confined spaces where death could find them easier. "Can you move faster?" Wick asked Weber, noting how Emma's small legs were struggling to keep pace through the difficult terrain. "I have to," Weber replied, lifting Emma despite his own fatigue. For her. Steam continued pouring from broken pipes, filling the tunnel with scalding mist that would make the next confrontation even more brutal. But it also provided concealment, turning the underground maze into something that favored defenders who knew how to use environment as weapon. Wick checked his ammunition count, 12 rounds in the Glock, 30 in the confiscated MP5, plus whatever explosives the dead operative had been carrying. Enough to fight, probably not enough to win against superior numbers in confined spaces. But winning wasn't the objective anymore. Survival was. Getting Emma out of Berlin's underground alive was all that mattered, even if it meant painting every tunnel red to do it. The sound of approaching boots grew louder, more coordinated, more determined. Time was running out, and the concrete walls were already stained with enough blood to feed nightmares. It was about to get worse. Weber was struggling, exhaustion and stress overwhelming his aging body. He leaned heavily against the tunnel wall, breathing hard from the physical exertion, the flash drive clutched in his trembling fingers as sweat, mixed with tunnel condensation on his pale face. Klaus. Wick caught the German man as he stumbled, noting how the chase and violence had drained him. "Stay with me." "Emma." Weber's eyes found the girl's terrified face. "We'll be fine. You'll be fine. I am here." More footsteps echoed through the tunnel, the remaining BND operatives closing in. "The codes," Wick said, grabbing the flash drive. "What's really on here?" "Evidence. BND corruption. Selling NATO secrets. Hans discovered it. They killed him." Weber struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against Wick's support as they moved deeper into the tunnel system. Emma stayed close, her small hand gripping Weber's jacket while her homework bag hung forgotten from her other arm. "There," Weber gasped, pointing toward a heavy steel door marked with maintenance warnings. "Old flood control station. We can defend there." The maintenance facility was a concrete chamber filled with industrial equipment that kept cities functioning: water pumps, electrical transformers, steam distribution systems. Weber limped inside, his face gray with exhaustion and fear, while Emma huddled close to the man who'd been protecting her since her real father's death. "Help me," Weber gasped, trying to move a massive valve assembly toward the entrance. "This door. Only way in." Wick grabbed the other end of the valve, muscles burning as they dragged industrial machinery into position to barricade the entrance. Emma pressed herself into the corner, clutching her homework bag while watching the adults prepare for violence she didn't understand. The pursuing operatives reached the facility entrance just as they finished their barricade. Voices echoed through the concrete chamber, rapid German coordination, tactical planning, the sound of power tools beginning to cut through steel. "They'll breach in minutes." Weber checked his concealed pistol with hands that shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. 8 rounds. You? Wick performed the same count, noting how Weber's condition was deteriorating from the physical and emotional stress. The barricade shuddered under assault as industrial saws carved through steel with methodical precision. Sparks cascaded from metal, illuminating the chamber in stuttering orange light that made shadows dance across concrete walls, while Emma watched with wide eyes that had seen too much death for one day. The first BND operative breached the barricade like a predator smelling blood. Flashbang first, rolled hard against the concrete floor before detonating in a burst of white phosphorus that turned the maintenance chamber into a sensory hell. The explosive device erupted with 9 million candle power and a 170 decibel thunderclap designed to liquefy inner ears and shut down nervous systems. Through the strobing after images and ringing deafness, Wick saw the operatives silhouetted against sparks and concrete. Tactical gear, ceramic body armor, assault rifle already tracking toward Emma's corner where she cowered, with her hands pressed against her ears, blood trickling from her nose. Target identification, systematic threat elimination, the kind of cold efficiency that reduced 8-year-old girls to acceptable collateral damage in operational reports. Wick moved through sensory disruption like a man swimming through molten lead, his vision a kaleidoscope of white spots and tunnel darkness, his balance shot to hell by inner ear damage that made the concrete floor feel like a ship's deck in heavy seas. But muscle memory guided him. Afghanistan had taught him to fight blind, deaf, and half-conscious. The operative's weapon tracked toward him with mechanical precision, muzzle flash strobing in the confined space like a deadly strobe light. Concrete chips exploded from the wall beside Wick's head as 5.56 rounds chewed through industrial equipment and ricocheted off steel piping. No room for hesitation, no time for moral calculation. Just close-quarters violence in a concrete box filled with enough industrial hazards to kill them all. Wick tackled the operative into a bank of steam distribution valves, their combined momentum, 200 pounds of American desperation meeting 180 pounds of German professionalism, slamming the man's skull against industrial equipment that had been installed when Berlin was divided and safety regulations were suggestions. The valve assembly, weakened by decades of corrosion and steam pressure that could strip flesh from bone, shattered under the impact. Cast iron cracked like an eggshell, releasing decades of pressurized fury. Superheated steam exploded from the broken system at 300 degrees Fahrenheit and 60 pounds per square inch, enough pressure to power turbines, enough heat to cook meat instantly. The operative's scream lasted exactly 2 seconds before scalding vapor seared his vocal cords closed, his throat swelling shut as superheated moisture turned his airway into a furnace. Weber was closest to the explosion. Shrapnel from the shattered valve, jagged pieces of cast iron moving at lethal velocity, tore through the air like industrial bullets. A piece the size of a dinner plate caught Weber in the side, the impact driving him against the concrete wall with bone-breaking force. "Klaus!" Wick shouted over the steam's roar, seeing Weber crumple as blood spread across his shirt. "Papa!" Emma screamed, her voice cutting through the industrial chaos like broken glass. She tried to run to Weber, but Wick caught her arm, pulling her back as more debris clattered across the concrete floor. "No, stay back!" Wick held her against his side while she fought to reach Weber, her small fists beating against his jacket as tears streamed down her face. "Papa's hurt, Papa's bleeding!" Her voice cracked into desperate sobs. "Help him, please help him!" But there was no time. The second operative was already through the breach, weapon raised, moving to flank Wick's position while his partner's corpse still twitched on concrete, now slick with blood and industrial fluids. Wick had learned to use environment as weapon in places where cover was improvised and every surface could kill you. His hand found the main electrical conduit, three-phase power that fed the facility's pumps and heating systems, and ripped it from its housing with desperate strength that tore fingernails and opened knuckles. Sparks erupted as live cables whipped through the chamber like electric snakes, each one carrying enough current to power city blocks. The operative tried to dodge, combat training screaming at him to avoid the electrical hazards. But confined space offered nowhere to retreat from municipal power that arced with lethal efficiency. 10,000 volts of three-phase current met flesh and bone like lightning striking a tree. The man's body convulsed as every muscle in his torso contracted simultaneously, his spine arching backward until vertebrae cracked from the strain. His weapon clattered to the floor as his nervous system short-circuited, smoke rising from